Hey there, I thought I would imp Metal Complex and do a 10 most carried knives. I've looked over my whole collection. This is including fixed blades and folders because I generally am out a lot about on my property, and a fixed blade is often my daily carry knife rather than a folder. That being said, there's usually a folder in my pocket too, so there's mostly folders on this list, but a couple of fixies as well. I'm just going to go through from my, from 10 to 1, 10 being my least most used and 1 being a knife that's very often on me. And then I'm going to do a bit of an interesting follow-up perhaps on some other sort of channel knives that have kind of fallen off a little bit, that I've lost interest in, or I've found being outdone by other knives and just not really visited or played with that much anymore. So let's go through it. I'm going to be pretty brisk, I hope. We're going to start off with number 10. Number 10 is the DBK knife. This is one that I really enjoy, and I carry it because I want to make an effort to actually use this guy. It's a rare knife. They're here to sort of get on the Kickstarter, and you certainly can't just get them from Blade HQ or anything like that. Yeah, overall, I kind of make an effort to put this one through its paces as often as I can because it's an expensive knife, and if anything ever does happen to it and it does sort of let me down, I'll certainly let you all know, because I think when you spend a lot on a knife, you want it to be, equally good, good enough for the amount of money you spent on it. This is certainly still that very much, but its testing period really never is ending. So good knife, good fun. I sort of will carry it as my everyday sort of chore knife. The Creeley Bushcrafter, the Field, no, what is this called? Oh goodness. Anyway, Gary Creeley's Bushcraft knife as a sort of pretty commonly used fire crafting or sort of fireplace style knife that I have. I use it to make little shreds of fat wood. I've got my little fat wood here. I use it to make shreds of fat wood to then make fires, whether it's inside or outside. Really nice sharp Scandinavian edge. I've used it on a whole lot of other stuff as well. In fact, it's wearing its use quite proudly at the moment. Magna Cut blade, good leather sheath. It's a pretty typical looking bushcraft knife, but it's just in one of the best steels you can get right now. Strikes a ferro on the back of it. Good leather sheath. Overall, it's a win. This used to be a bit higher up on the list. But it's sort of dropped back a little bit, but still very competent and a really good sort of all-rounder is the Benchmade, what was this called? The Bailout, not the Bug Out, the Bailout. And this is of course without the glass breaker, with a sort of custom backspacer, which definitely improves the grip of the knife. Aluminium scales and M1 blade steel. A good thin slicing knife that has certainly proven to be tough enough for a lot of my uses as well. Falling off a little bit from, used to probably be always top 3 or top 2, used to use it all the time. It's just kind of been pushed out a little bit by some other blades, but still very, very pleasing knife to use, carry, hold, play with. The TRM Neutron is still one of my favorites. Could still be my favorite knife. It's just kind of dropped off in its use a little bit. I'm just finding that the role is being met usually by knives later on in the piece. So the Neutron, great little knife, the 3-inch kind of variant of this style of TRM, and 20 CV steel, slices really well. Great performer, possibly still the best overall recommendable EDC knife in general, in my opinion. I've been carrying the Atom slightly more. The TRM Atom is a slightly bigger version of it. I've generally found just lately, and it's not from anything cool, but I've been trying to, when I cut up my apples and pears to eat, I'm on a health kick, and my snacks are now sliced up apple and pear. This guy crosses most pears and basically all apples, so that's why this one has gone up. Yeah, definitely a pretty dad reason, not a cool reason, but that one's gone up in use a whole lot as well. This guy here is almost too good to be true for what you're getting for the price. It's a knife that is as good as the Benchmade Bug Out, with a far better blade steel for a lower cost. Other elements fairly similar. They sliding bar style lock. They're sort of somewhat lightweight plastic handles, but this Hogue Decker in Magna Cut it's almost like a knife that's made and sold just to upset the apple cart. It's crazy good value, and I'll generally use this because it's quite cheap and because the steel is, basically impervious to most of the things I do to it. I'll use this quite often as like a beater folding knife. Even though it's quite lightweight, it really does do the job really, really well. And there's really nothing too wrong with this knife at all. I think I like the previous knives more in terms of a personal taste, but can't deny that I choose this quite often. When I'm after something a little bit more hardy or just something with a more fun mechanism, I'll take one of my paramilitary 2s. This one still has its upside down clip from the brief dalliance I had in tip down carry. I'm finally down to just 3 sprays of water on my bread now. And this one here is probably the best paramilitary 2 overall that's ever been made, in my opinion. This is the Crewwear micarta paramilitary 2. Really, really nice, comfortable, softish feeling micarta handles. It feels nicer than the G10, still nice and grippy, still pretty impervious to filth and muck. You can just kind of blast this out under a hot tap. I love the compression lock. The Crewwear steel is not as cool as the 15V steel for sure. They're both about as stainless as one another. The 15V is going to last way longer at the edge. The Crewwear is going to be a little bit easier to sharpen, but overall I'm mainly choosing this one because of the handle. What I should do is put my 15V blade on the micarta handle. That's probably the ideal choice, but I haven't done that yet. So there's a lot of carry going on between those 2 knives, but it's because it's the same model. I'm just going to keep it in the same entry. Third most carried knife is this humble Mora Light My Fire knife. I use this guy all the time. It's currently quite filthy, and this is really my go-to clip on, maybe leave out in the rain, maybe forget about. Really, really high levels of use going on with this though. Basically the knife that gets, you know, if I'm a bit worried about what's going to happen, or I'm a bit like, oh, that's not really a knife job, I'll use this for the knife job. It's thin, it's not tough by any means. It's probably only got about 1/3 of a tang in there, but hadn't failed so far. And it's got the really neat little fire lighting addition on the back there. It rides around usually in my Yeti box full of garden gear, and it gets a heck of a lot of use. The edge is still holding up really well, given that it's a Mora stainless, which I'm not sure if this is so new that it's the recycled stainless they're using, or if this is still the old 13C26 or whatever, 13C27 or 12C26, whatever. But quite a newer, this used to be the Light My Fire knife, but now it's just the companion Sparks. Obviously it's changed in branding, but still very similar. Great knife, cheap, does most jobs you'd realistically ever need a fixed blade knife to do, apart from the silly stuff. Top 2. So the knife that I carry mainly just because I like it, and it's not particularly better at much. It's probably the worst at most things out of all of them, but a knife that I truly just carry because I love it. As a knife, as an object, is the Alma Eagle lightweight. This is the lightweight full flat ground version. I've got the Eagle heavy duty as well, which I also like, but I like the flat ground just a little bit more. Just love how it looks. It does slice and perform fine, and it gets, it crosses them apples and pears, no worries at all, because it is about a 4-inch blade. Really like the classical look of this. I've gone on about this knife way too many times already. You know it, you love it, I love it. The Alma Eagle lightweight, ultralight, whatever. But my most carried knife, still the Spyderco Stretch. So the Spyderco Stretch is, I think, a superior knife to the paramilitary 2 in terms of just a pure user knife. Yeah, it's not as fun to use, it's probably not as strong on the lockup, but it's simple. You give this knife to anyone, they'd figure it out. And it's got that sort of really, well, this one's quite time worn at the moment, but the nature of it just does feel a little bit more disposable, a little bit less precious than the paramilitary 2. You get a paramilitary 2 out the box, it still feels like quite a premium knife, in my opinion anyway. These guys don't feel like that. They feel like a quality knife, but they're not as prone to be babied or prone to feel, too special, which for me, rather than, it's not my favorite knife, but it's certainly my most used knife because of that. The K390 steel is a performer. I can sharpen it quite easily as well, I've noticed. Look, it's all rusty. It's not even a stainless knife, but I don't know, something about this, I think it's just how it fits in my hand, how it performs, what I use it for. This is definitely my most carried pocket knife, the Spyderco Stretch. It's a good one. So let's move on to 5 knives that have sort of either been phased out or they just didn't end up connecting with as much. They're still in my collection, they're not going anywhere, but just when I look at them, I'm like, oh yeah, it's been a while. You have been obsoleted by something else here, or you know what, it just didn't work out. So for a start, I used to go on about this knife all the time, the Gerber Strong Arm. So the Gerber Strong Arm used to just be my dual sort of knife. And as time has gone on, I've realized that I prefer this guy in hand and this guy in hand, and also the performance of both of them over the Strong Arm. The Strong Arm truly is that sharpened pry bar, just a thick bit of steel with a pretty rough edge on it. This is the BD1 version of it, BDZ1 version of it. You know, and it's still a fine knife. It's still really strong. It's still got a good sheath. It's still recommendable, but the price has gone up a little bit, so I probably wouldn't recommend them as much as I used to now. And also, yeah, there's just more comfort to be had in most other handles than this guy here. I feel like my hand might be slightly bigger, too big for this handle. It's a bit skinny maybe. Don't know what it is. It's nitpicking, but the basic facts are that it's been a long time since I've reached for the strong arm. Even when I first got here to this new house, I was using it a fair bit. But yeah, it's just the purposes of use for it aren't really met with me as much anymore. And when they are sort of approached, I'll use one of the others instead. So that's the strong arm, you know, on the way out a little bit. The Spyderco Spidey Chef. So still really like this knife. I love how it looks, like how it performs. It's absolutely fine. It's an LC200N blade, which is good steel, good almost impervious steel. And that's used to be what I sort of thought, that's why it's my favorite knife, because the steel, oh, you know, I'm never going to rust the steel. But then as I used the Spyderco Stretch and the steel rusted a little bit and I kept sharpening it and it still kept working, I kind of realized I didn't mind that much, and that wasn't really something I was that impressed with anymore. If I was a real avid fisherman or an outdoorsman, this might be what I would take. I am slightly outdoorsy. I do go kayaking. My kayaking knife is actually a Spyderco Salt, which is you know, bright green, plastic handle, you know, lighter weight, less sort of you know, vanishes less amongst your gear than this sort of very matte silver finish. So yeah, just in terms of purposes, my EDC knives kind of got, I prefer the paramilitary, I prefer the Atom, I prefer the Stretch. Yeah, just kind of got outphased by a lot of the other stuff. Still recommendable knife. I still don't dislike the Spidey Chef at all. I think it's still design-wise very nice. I would like it now, if they were to do it again, I'd like it to be a little bit thinner. Not the thinnest knife in the world, and I think they should just go full on into food prep, make it thinner. And that might make it more relevant, once again, to me at least. But that's, yeah, that being said, it's definitely, it's down on the list, absolutely, without a doubt. The Benchmade 941 was a knife that I like, but I never really, you know what I should have done? I should have just got the 940 again. So the 940, this is the 945, sorry. The 945 is the smaller version of the 940, and it's just a bit too small for my hand. It's good, it's well made, it's fine. It's an S30V, which is still fine steel. It's just so outclassed by like the TRM Neutron. And to that, you know, it's not even that much more, that much cheaper than a TRM Neutron. And the TRM Neutron just is so much better than this knife in every sense. Because it's a small knife, you're not even really going for that perhaps durability of the thicker blade and the Tanto point. It really is playing in this real EDC crowd, and it's just kind of a bit of an odd duck to me. It kind of sits with the Para 3 a little bit as an odd duck knife that is sort of nowhere near as good as its bigger variant. And I mean, the Para 3 is just in my room. I've still got it, but that's never even been a real contender in my daily uses. But anyway, 945 just hasn't gelled. In terms of a knife that I do love, absolutely love, but has definitely just been obsoleted, is the Falcon F1 Pro. The DBK Bushcrafter is just so much better than this knife for me. I just prefer it way more. I like the steel more, I like the LMAX more than the COS. I like the handle more on the DBK. This is a little bit of a thinner handle. I love the styling of this knife, but a fixed blade knife I'm not even going to carry for styling because it really doesn't matter, because it sits in the sheath. You don't really get it out and play with it all the time. Great knives. If you can't get a DBK knife, this guy or a Bark River knife will do absolutely a similar job really well. But the F1 Pro to me, just, yeah, again, got ran out of town just a little bit by some other really good contenders. So there you are. And lastly, a knife that, whilst I stand by, I gave it a pretty positive review, but it just never found its place with me. And I'm keeping it because it's fun to get out and every now and then play with. But the Demco AD2025, something about it just didn't find it in my pocket very much at all. Maybe it's my steel snob sitting in the back of my mind going, oh, it's only AUS 10. I doubt it, but it's whatever it is about it. I think it just might be a little bit too wide, maybe a bit too much of it sticks out of the pocket. Maybe it's because I bought it in bloody orange and that's my problem. I don't know, whatever it is, the AD20.5 just doesn't find itself being carried and used. Maybe it's the shark's foot type blade. Maybe I look at all these other blades and think, just no. I think it's something about, mostly about how it looks, and perhaps the blade shape to me is what's doing it. In action, it's fun knife to play with, open and close, flip open and shut. More fun than probably any of these locks on the table, and very, very strong, very, very competently made knife, absolutely. But for whatever reason, or for a combination of those reasons, it just never really took off with me in my personal collection. And yeah, so to that point, I almost find it a notable omission from this 10 that I really do carry all the time. Look, I also every now and then I'll pick up something like the Swish Buoy. The Spyderco Police is another one that's sort of been outclassed, outphased a little bit, but it never really was like a real go-to, because it is so big and a bit weird, frankly, and more of a showcase of the K390 steel. The Quiet Carry, this is, which one is this? The Drifter, is it? No, it's not the Drifter. I don't know. It's in Vanax. It's this one here. Again, I just forget it. It just feels like a bit of a forgettable knife. It's just slightly underwhelming enough that I don't think to take it out, even though it is a really good performer. Then my Alex Stron fixed blade knife. It could be my favorite fixed blade. In fact, that or the DBK, really almost my favorite fixed blade knife, but I just find it's almost too nice to go and put into the muck and the mud. And you look at poor old Gary's knife, look at this guy. It's just, I was never afraid to mess this one up. Something about that knife, I don't know what it was. It's just, it was too pristine from the day I got it. And so whilst I'll take it out and cut with it from time to time, it's funny enough to say that my possible favorite knife just kind of sits in a drawer at any rate. Hope you found this video interesting. 16 minutes of me talking shit about knives. You know what? If that's for you, then thank you for being here. I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.